Just before we start the episode, a short note to say I'm editing and launching a new digital magazine focused on comics and comic storytelling called Panel by Panel. You can pre-order at panelbypanel.com or clicking the card on the top right of this video. The AV Club's Oliver Sava said it's his new favourite place for comics journalism, so we hope it'll be yours too. Anyway, back to the episode. This week we're kicking off a new Creators Edition series of episodes with K. Michael Russell, a colorist who's been working on books for Oni Press, Image, Dark Horse, IDW and many other publishers. You might recognise his work most prominently from Glitterbomb or Postal, both of which we'll talk about in these episodes, but Kurt also has a really cool YouTube channel that teaches you colouring and shows a lot of the process in colouring. I've learned a ton of stuff from that as well. But for this first chat, we're going to be discussing some of Kurt's work on Judge Dredd 26, and how he uses colour to signify locations, and some of the little tips and tricks he's learned along the way to make colours work. You're watching Strip Panel Naked, I'm Hass, this week joined by K. Michael Russell, and we're going to show you some of the cool stuff lurking in the pages of some of the best comics. The first thing I wanted to talk about was how you use the colours to create locations, which is it's a really simple effect.
Sure.
I think once you've used that as the framework and the groundwork, then you can start to play with other stuff on top of that quite a lot. But the Dredd pages that you sent through, first you just want to give us a bit of context for what we're seeing in terms of the bit of the story.
Yeah, so it's Judge Dredd in the outfit with the blue eyes here. You don't really know that if you don't know the story, but he's in hiding or cognito or something right now. He's walking down the street and then up to like this subway area, and then there's also the other agent, the female agent, is like trapped in his mind, completely outside of reality. That's one of the quickest kind of shorthand ways to tell a reader that, okay, this is happening somewhere else, So we've got these greens and reds and really saturated environment, and then we've got this other environment that's almost entirely this kind of brownish sepia color, and so it's a quick way to say, okay, these are two different locations, even though these panels are all mixed together. If I had colored her the same way that I colored the rest of the environment, then in the environment that Dredd is in, then it wouldn't have been obvious that she is not in the same place that he is, or even in the same reality, or whatever you want to call it, that he is. So I kind of used that as a trick to separate those out.
Is that always, when you get a script, a page of the script, and you get the artwork, is that kind of like the first thing you would always do? Would you always start to try and categorize locations by a color?
Yeah, I tend to think in scenes usually at a time, but I will sort of flip through a script and go, okay, how many different locations do I have? What all am I going to have to separate out here? And that way, it's easier for me to say, okay, I'm going to use a kind of a greenish thing here. I want to make sure I don't use that again on this other location, so that there's no confusion about that. So yeah.
Big thing that I was taught with a film background is if you use a color, they tend to have kind of like a emotional baggage, or like they have like a feeling associated with them. And so you've kind of gone for this heavy saturated red for the outside, and it kind of dips into this blue when it goes into the subway area, and then on the train it becomes green.
And I did kind of subtly shift that from that blue to green that you're seeing on that second page I sent, and I was thinking, that green feels a little sickly and off, and something bad might happen in here, and then it does. So I was thinking that's kind of what my thought process was.
I want to talk about the green you used on the second page. Well, we get the green coming through a bit on the lighting on the middle panel, but then obviously we kind of hit this quite heavy green on the last two panels, and that second from last panel, there'll be a colorist term for this, I'm sure. You've kind of like gone over the blacks as well on everything that is in Judge Dredd.
They call it color holds, is the industry term, and I don't know why it's called that, so don't ask me. But no, it's just a way to create some depth. As things go into the atmosphere and further into the environment, things get less saturated and less contrast usually, and so and now obviously he's only a few feet away from this person behind him, but it's a good kind of visual cheat, I guess, or technique, I guess is probably a better term for it, to say that this is further in the background, because there is so much black in the background. If I had kept it black, then I thought it was sort of not overpowering, but it was it didn't create quite as much depth. So I wanted to make sure that he popped off that background a bit there.
Because you said you wanted to go for this sickly sort of feel with the green, and the blue heading into the subway is it's like a very icy, cold blue. So, but how much time do you spend picking those shades? How important is the shade, or is it more just the kind of, as long as you can get the emotion across?
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something that Dave McCaig told me once, and it stuck with me, because he said it was actually at a dinner with a bunch of colorists. There's like 10 colorists at this dinner in Heroes, and there's all sorts of conversations happening, and then those moments when it gets kind of quiet, and then someone says something and everybody hears it, and at the moment he said, colors really don't matter. It was one of those like quiet moments, and everybody sort of like the record scratch. Everybody looked at, and he's like, only value and contrast matter. I was like, oh yeah. But that's the truth. A lot of times the colors that you're using, I don't want to say that they don't matter. Obviously they matter to an extent. But whether I had chosen blue or yellow or purple or not that any color would fit there, but it's the colors are less important than are you helping to tell the story? Are you getting the emotional effect that you want? Are you drawing the eye where it should go? So that sort of thing. So it's I probably didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. A lot of times when I'm setting up a page like this, I'll set it all the local colors, as far as, and the local colors just the I guess what you would say the real color, the actual color of under a white light, what that would be. And then sometimes I'll just drop a layer on top, just kind of as a wash effect, and then just kind of play around with that layer, and play around with some blue or a purple or yellow or an orange, or just and see what jumps out at me, and then use that as sort of a baseline to work off of. But I'm still relatively new to this business. I've only been doing it a couple of years, so for me, there's still a lot of trial and error at times. Where it's like, let me try, that doesn't work. Let me try something else. So I definitely don't always have the right answer at the beginning.
No, that's interesting that you kind of like would give it the natural color, and then start to play around with it. Because again, that to me brings to mind, the way you're working with film, when you've got a scene that looks like a particular color, because obviously that's just the way it looks, and then you start to play around the lighting on it to create these different effects.
Yeah, and it depends on the book. I mean, some books and certain styles you can do that, and then others, I'll just have you get a really strong idea, or there's something specific you want to do, then you might not go local color first, but for certain pages and certain situations, that's how I work.
Which does lead nicely onto some of the topics we'll cover next time with Kurt when we look at his work on Postal. Until then, thanks for watching. Strip Panel Naked continues to exist in this format thanks to the amazing support of patrons from the Patreon site. Click on the link on the left to see more, but for your support you do get access to tons and tons of extras, so I'd love it if you check it out. For more comics talk and analysis, you can find me on Twitter at HassanOE, and finally hit subscribe on the right to stay up to date with all the latest episodes, and we will see you next time.